All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the City of Homestead City Council workshop to order. Today is Thursday, May 27th, 2021, and it is 5:33 p.m. Thank you all for being here tonight. And as always, the city will hold a hybrid council workshop. The public may participate in person at City Hall or virtually utilizing video conference via WebEx events or the toll-free conference call number. Please go to cityofhomestead.com/calendar for specific details and instructions on participation utilizing video and telephonic conferencing. This meeting can also be viewed live on the City Access channel or city website at cityofhomestead.com. Public comments can be made in person at the meeting or emailed to publiccomments@cityofhomestead.com. Written public comments are limited to 300 words per comment. Written public comments on specific agenda items should include your name, address, the item that you'd like to comment on, and your comment. It can be submitted by noon on Wednesday, May 26, 2021, and will be included in the minutes. Written public comments on general matters should also include your name, address, together with your comment, and it can be submitted up until 30 minutes after the end of the council meeting and will be included in the minutes. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Bailey.
Here.
Councilman Shelley.
Here.
Councilwoman Abela.
Here.
Councilman Fletcher. Councilman Roth.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fairclough Staggers. Mayor Losner.
I'm here. Thank you. Again, welcome and thank you all for being here. Madam Clerk, car number 3181, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an item we're seeking direction from Council on how these American Rescue funds may be allocated. And if I may just start with a brief PowerPoint. Okay. On March 11, 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law, establishing the Coronavirus Fiscal Recovery Funds. The City of Homestead has been allocated a total of $19,192,087. And this evening, we will be discussing how those funds may potentially be used. On May 10, 2021, the interim final rule, which we'll be calling the IFR, was issued, which established a framework for determining the types of programs and services eligible under the Act. The categories for eligible uses are: the first is public health and economic impacts. The second is premium pay for eligible workers. The third is revenue loss. And the fourth is investments in infrastructure. Staff and council and our attorneys have reviewed the IFR and considered potential projects and programs that meet the eligibility requirements under the Act. It's important to note that the IFR remains open to further public comment until July 16th. We expect additional guidance to be provided after the comment period closes. So tonight's discussion is based on the IFR as it exists now, and in the next slides that we're going to go through, it's really just an initial concept based on staff's understanding of the IFR guidelines and our individual conversations with each of you. You're going to see some numbers for the various eligible categories, but these are definitely not set in stone. We expect the numbers to change as we learn more and have a better understanding of the overall impact of COVID and the corresponding need. And please keep in mind as I go through the slides that this list is by no means final. Also, all eventual uses of the funds must be COVID-related pursuant to the IFR as it stands today, and in any way it may be amended. We just, with this PowerPoint, wanted to provide an example of how the various categories may eventually be funded. And we'd also like to schedule another workshop after July 16th, because that's when the public comment period closes, and we'll have more guidance in terms of how these monies can be used. The first category, public... Thanks. The first category, public health and economic impacts. To address the negative economic impacts of the pandemic, including but not limited to assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, as well as aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. Under this part, this is where we would provide commercial assistance, including small business grants, rental assistance programs, job fairs, business consulting, seminars, workshops, and we may also, under this category, be able to make some of the facade improvements that were spoken about yesterday, and possibly provide incentives for businesses. Also here, we would provide residential assistance, mortgage, rental, utilities, and these programs would be very similar to the programs that we have now. And continuing with the first category, housing assistance, affordable housing, first-time home buyers, digital upgrades to the city's development services, evidence-based community violence intervention programs, youth assistance programs, vaccination efforts, assistance to nonprofits. The second category is premium pay for eligible workers. The IFR notes that these are workers who have been and continue to be relied on to maintain continuity of operations of essential critical infrastructure sectors. The IFR defines essential work as work involving regular in-person interactions or regular physical handling of items that were also handled by others. A worker may not receive premium pay for telework performed from a residence. What has been contemplated in our discussions is a 1% one-time payment for essential field personnel who continued to work in person during the pandemic. We're not yet clear on who under the IFR guidelines may be eligible under this category, but our field personnel include parks, electric utilities, public works, customer service, and the police department. The third category is revenue loss, to replace lost revenues due to COVID-19. The IFR includes a formula for determining lost revenue. We're working on determining what that actual amount is, but we're currently estimating it at about $3 million. And this definitely appears to be the most flexible of all categories because the lost revenues would go back to the general fund and would likely be able to be available for general fund expenditures, including such things as park improvements. The fourth and final category, investments in infrastructure. This includes broadband infrastructure, water and sewer eligible infrastructure, and water meter replacement. Timing and the next steps. We'd like to come to the June council meeting to confirm the categories of spending, the public health and economic impacts, premium pay, revenue loss, and infrastructure investments. A July workshop after the July 16th public comment period, and again, we expect to have more clarity on things that we may be able to use the money for, and also to address anything that may come up this evening. Funding will be distributed in 2 tranches. We've already received the first tranche of $9,596,043.50, and the balance is expected in about 12 months. The first interim report is due July 31st. Thereafter, quarterly project and expenditure reports will be due. Costs must be incurred by December 31st, 2024, and the period of performance will last until December 31st, 2026. And again, Mayor and Council, this is our first workshop. As we better understand the guidelines, we'll better understand how we can spend the money and also better appreciate how COVID has impacted us and where the most need is. And we will be proceeding accordingly. So with that, questions, I figure there are no questions and comments, but in case there are, this is the time for them.
Thank you. Ms. Shelley? Councilwomen? Initial questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead.
I'll say one thing, Mayor. Thank you. This is really exciting, obviously, very much needed. The one thing that I keep thinking about is, especially with the food and rental assistance, that we really try to tie that in with helping our residents get back into the workforce. A lot of businesses are having a really hard time finding people to work. And it's not, I just want us all to keep in mind, it's not just people being lazy. I'm sure there are some, but there is also just this still big fear for a lot of people getting back in there. So to make sure that we keep in mind mental health programs, and anything else that could help ease some of the stress of getting back to a normal. I think for me, that's one thing that I've been really trying to figure out, ways that we can be of as much assistance as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. I was looking for like a one-pager of the suggestions. Was that email that I can pull it up now? Like you have like suggestions on how the money can be spent or allocated. Is there a one-pager, like just an itemization?
You mean, do I have a one-pager right now? No.
Was one circulated so that I can look it up on my email?
I don't think so. Did you see something? Are you referring to something in particular?
Was this PowerPoint circulated prior to?
No, it wasn't. We actually just finished this PowerPoint this morning, or it would have been included in the package.
Can we go back maybe to
Absolutely,
the...
yes,
Thanks.
yes. I'll go back. These are the 4 categories. And under these categories, I'm just going to go to the first one that we talked about. This slide and this slide is under the first category for, sorry about that, public health and economic impacts. So as you go through the guidelines and the frequently asked questions, there's a great deal of things that can be done under public work, under public health and economic impacts. A lot of what we have here, based on our conversations with you, is more inclined toward the economic impacts, because to Councilwoman Bailey's point, as you read through the guidelines, there's many things you can do with public health, but it's not something that we talked about a lot. So here is commercial assistance, residential assistance, and then these are specific things that were brought up in our conversations: the housing assistance, affordable housing, home buyers, first time, the development services, upgrades, and then things like community violence intervention programs and youth assistance programs and vaccination efforts and assistance to nonprofits are specifically articulated in the guidelines, which is why we have some of those categories up there. And we'll forward this PowerPoint to all of you so you have it.
You good, or are you thinking?
I'm brainstorming and trying to digest as well. Can this be more of a fluid conversation instead of...
Yeah, and certainly there will be a lot of effort to fine tune, and each one of these programs will have its own program definitions. But a couple of questions I had, and if you leave these screens up. Is a small business defined? I mean, we throw around that term a lot, but is it defined anywhere? I mean, I know how we defined it for the recent CRA program we did, but...
That's a great question. I'm not sure if it specifically defines it, but we'll see.
Just curious if, because there was an employee limit and a revenue limit on the program that we approved a few weeks ago, which, in my mind, excludes a lot of locals that are probably beyond those limits, but that we all, I think, reasonably consider small business. So, that was just a curiosity as to whether or not that is a defined term somewhere.
That is a great question. And also, what we can do after this, because public comment is still open, we can ask these questions directly and try to get answers before our next workshop.
Okay, next question. Evidence-based community violence intervention programs. Can you translate that from legalese to real world? Is that a
Absolutely.
summer kid program, camp
It's
program?
similar to
Sparks
what the
program?
Explorers do and the programs that they have at the PAL gym, to the current programs that we have now. So I think the evidence-based is just simply programs that exist and have been shown to have positive impacts. But specifically for the city, we were thinking of the Explorers and also the PAL gym programs and any other programs that maybe would want to come into the city. And again, the numbers on here are not set in stone. This is very arbitrary how these numbers came out.
I wasn't so much focused on that number as I was trying to wrap my head around, okay, what does that,
And-
what could that mean?
A lot of what the goal is, as we talked about it, is to address violence in the street, to address youth violence, and the increase in youth violence during the pandemic.
And then, beneath that, youth assistance programs, how would that,
Here we were contemplating things like summer jobs programs, educational programs to help youth with resumes and/or practice interviews, anything at all that would help with the youth kind of getting their feet wet with employment and/or any other assistance they may need.
and of course, I'm in favor of the assistance for not-for-profits, but there are a lot of not-for-profits that may be in legal designation and name, but not actually in practice, and I hope that as we implement those guidelines, we can establish some, a longer-term history and real revenue generation and demonstrable, ongoing, and consistent service, rather than just, it seems everybody's got their own not-for-profit now. So that's, among that category, that's what I'm going to be looking for, so that, legitimate, certainly homestead-based organization.
Understood. And also, it's important to keep in mind with not-for-profits that I don't think under the terms of the guidelines we'd be able to just give money to not-for-profits unless there was the nexus to them addressing some COVID-related issue or something that had happened. And I also don't know if it would necessitate a procurement program, but no matter what, we would be coming back to council, so anything that we're suggesting would be vetted.
And those are some of the questions, and I've, shared my thoughts with you, that there are, a handful of longstanding not-for-profits in this community that regularly do events to raise money to provide significant scholarships, and they were not able to hold those events, therefore they had significant revenue losses, and, if we didn't have reserves, you're not awarding those scholarships. So that may or may not be off the table. We just don't know that at this point.
Yeah, and I would ask that each of you, if you have thoughts, specific thoughts like that, to get them to us so that we can try to get some sort of pre-approval for whatever we're suggesting.
It's not here, but in reading through the materials and your itemization there, I know that one of the big things is broadband, and I know that ties in and was, showed the inadequacy in this community of the availability of broadband for a lot of kids who couldn't attend virtually. And it talks about broadband infrastructure. So we would actually have to, and I guess somewhere in here I read that there was like emphasis on the last mile connection to the user. So in theory, if there were a home in Homestead that did not have the connection, would that count as providing the infrastructure?
That's also a great question that we've kicked around. We believe it would. There are programs that are out there where if the internet is available in a particular neighborhood, but certain people can't afford it, that there are programs where their bill would be paid, if you will, for a certain number of months. So we're not sure exactly what that would mean for us. I think that is one way we could look at it. But the thing about broadband, that is, when they talk about infrastructure, one of the categories that's specifically identified. And Jerry may be able to talk more about broadband than me, because we've wondered about programs like that, and also if we're able to improve our fiber connectivity and bring better service to even something like the Cybrarian.
Jerry, any thoughts on that?
Well, we're definitely waiting for more detail from the federal government. Once we get more information, we could definitely refine to see what kind of things we're doing or can do. But like Kate says, the last mile connectivity, if there's a house out on the west side of town that there's no Comcast, there's no AT&T or something like that, we might be able to help them out. But once again, the devil's in the details here.
I guess my takeaway is there's not enough details yet. Or not, I mean, clearly there are some hard no's and a few definite yeses, but there's a whole lot of maybes and unaddressed issues that it's a lot to deal with in, I guess, the next 6 or 7 weeks before the next guidance comes out. Have we seen anything and talking about perhaps helping first-time home buyers and providing, expanding our program for what I guess the soft second mortgage? And I'm wondering if we've seen any or going to be looking for rules that, for those who sell within that 10-year period and we are repaid, even though the program ends, I guess, in 24 or 26, I'm wondering if we would be permitted to continue having a revolving loan fund from those loans that are repaid at any time. I mean, do we have guidance on, okay, do we have to send it back, or are we allowed to keep that program going? I mean, it could be 12 or 13 years from now before we know that final result.
We also, I went back to the slide where we did provide housing assistance. We did put down first-time home buyers because we very much like to be able to expand that program. I think the challenge for that one may be the nexus to COVID. Certainly if someone was about to buy a house and lost their job maybe, and there is an absolute connection to COVID and they need help now, I think it's very clear that that's housing assistance. You raise a good point, Mayor, with respect to, comparing it to the CRA program, that there's that payback period. I think that's a great question we can try to have answered, because maybe it's a one-time help and there is no payback. I don't know. We can try to follow up on that and get some clarity.
Well, and it's interesting, and I know that generally it has to be somewhat related to COVID, but clearly there's social engineering built into this program, and that this may be one of those nuances in housing that the pandemic further demonstrated and exacerbated the disparities of people to obtain housing or obtain loans. Maybe there doesn't need to be as much nexus, and this could be more of, and I hate to use the word, but a windfall for our ability to fund those kinds of programs on an ongoing basis.
And I think it would be really important for us as we follow up to be very clear as we reach out and try to get answers if we can extend that theory and have it fall under the parameters, because that would give us a lot of leeway to do exactly that. So we'll try to get an answer for that as well.
And I know you indicated we don't yet really have a final handle on actual loss of revenue for recoupment. And you and I have had conversation that those words excluding utilities jumped off the page, and I would guess that may be one of the biggest pieces of our revenue loss, or unpaid utility bills. I guess we're going to have to get clarification on that and try to find our way around that. It's interesting that and I admit most municipalities don't have all of the utilities that we have, but our budget's going to be hit particularly hard potentially through water, wastewater, and electric utility. And I guess we could apply some of that to our unpaid garbage and bulk waste bills, but not necessarily, traditional utilities. But then on the other hand, it allows us to provide utility assistance. So that's kind of like taking it out of your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket. It would be a lot cleaner if, hey, call it what it is, and we lost that revenue, and let's put it in the proper silo.
Matt, do you have anything on the electric part of the utilities? I think we had a conversation about it. If not, we can follow up on it. But
No, I
thought
think we're going to have to follow up on the electric piece.
Okay.
All right, I'll stop hogging the microphone, and I think Councilwoman Avila, I think, wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I think that those are excellent questions, especially with the homebuyer program. The 10-year repay back period, that's to deter people using it for the wrong reasons, for building investments and selling and flipping. So I would hope that they would allow us to initially create that homeownership purchase and then continue to reinvest it in that same plan. So hopefully that'll be the answer to that question. I think for me, these funds are to help ignite economic restabilization and recovery. I think we did a lot of discussion on that when it came to rewriting and revising our code to help grow the business sector and small mom and pop businesses in our downtown. Maybe we can put some funding into that process. That's going to take a lot of money to rewrite our code with the attorneys, and it's going to take a couple years. But I think we could get it done within the 5-year period required. Also, encouraging safe outdoor activities. I think that falls right in line with our parks. We have 13 parks, and I know that at least with the sports complex project and Harris Field and JD Red, of course, we're redoing the bathrooms now with the CBDG money, but this concession stands and the overall general areas, there's still a lot of neglect that has occurred over the last 15, 20 years that we can take a look at and try to just bring it to par, not necessarily expand on those, but bring those facilities to par. And improving and supporting our community policing efforts. That will help reduce violence. It'll improve mental health. And going back to my original suggestion many moons ago at the start of 2020, talking about a community liaison to help connect the services that are being offered throughout Team Homestead and our nonprofit sectors with residents directly, there may be an opportunity to finally create that type of position, fund it through this program at least for 3 to 5 years while we build a budget to keep it more permanent. So those, I think, for me, those are some of the priorities that I'd like to see built into this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's still, there's a lot of unknowns, and I think we're all aware of that, how we can actually put this out there. But a few things that I think of listening to the discussion on the way here and here, sitting here now, was with the small business development monies that may be available, has anybody done any surveying or an analysis to see how many businesses within the city of Homestead have actually gone out of business since COVID started? I would be interested to know that. And then in the IFR notes, would this be money that the employees that worked during that period of time with solid waste, who had to keep our trash and stuff maintained, the police department, utilities, the line workers, the linemen, would this be in a form of a thank you bonus, or is it hazard pay, or what is it initially set up for? I don't understand that. I mean, they all deserve it. They all were out there working hard to make sure that the services that would normally be routine were continued routine. I mean, the linemen, the utility workers, the solid waste folks, the water and sewer department, anybody who works in utilities who had to interact with, customers, and especially during the peak of COVID, I'm not sure how it affected them. I mean, sure, mentally and physically, it affected us all throughout this whole time. But what is that for? Is that $1 million? Is it simply a bonus of some sort? I thank you very much for sticking in there with us, because we all appreciate everything that all of them have done. But I'm not quite sure what it's for.
I think it's exactly that, kind of a thank you. I think it's comparable to the hazard pay, but it is a boost, an extra boost, I think a one-time boost, a monetary boost to people who have been out working in the field throughout the pandemic. And we'll get more clarity on that as well, but I'm pretty certain that that's what it is. And I think that council has the ability to identify who that is. because arguably, and we heard a lot of this, people talking about this on the National League of Cities webinar, arguably it's anybody who worked throughout the pandemic and wasn't staying home. But in our discussions with the council members, it was clear to us that just the workers that you're referring to, Councilman, are the workers that are deserving of this. And we've listed the, as you said, the public works, the solid waste people, parks, our field workers. It includes the police departments too. But again, I think the council has the prerogative to determine who would get that. And 1% was just suggested because it was comparable to the 1% hazard pay. But there's, as far as we know at this point, there's not specific guidelines in terms of that number and what it would be. But we will do our best to get more on that.
Right, so just, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, unknown facts, unknown uses for this money, and I'm sure it'll get more specific as time goes on. There's a lot of things in the city that definitely could use attention, whether it was COVID-related or otherwise, in the parks area and infrastructure. I constantly worry about the quality of the water that the city produces. Do we have enough of it to maintain, and are our systems in place where we can maintain the growth that's been continuously happening in the city? A lot of people complain about water pressure. Some of it is justified, and some of it is maintenance on a resident's part where they need to change clean out their filters and things on their faucets and whatnot. So, I'm sure what's going to get clearer and clearer, and we as a body up here are going to be able to hone in on some of the more specific needs, and I think the more important needs as time goes on. And that's all for now. I mean, there's plenty to learn as we go through this process.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Shelley?
Thank you, Mayor. I think mine's more a philosophical, I guess, weighing in versus, say, independent categories here. I know when we had our discussion one-on-one, that was one of my questions then as well, which is, I think we've chosen, or what's being presented to us is kind of impact a bunch of areas. And so instead of taking the monies and all, putting it all in one spot or a couple spots, it's kind of spreading around against anywhere from infrastructure to social services to everything in between. And so you're kind of spreading out the effects, so everybody maybe get touched by these dollars and helped by these dollars. But I don't know how many people we're actually going to be able to help. And I know that's part of the details as we understand how these programs are going to work, is ultimately how far will that money go based on what we're allowed to do and what type of projects we're allowed to fund by it. So I think for my purposes, my direction would be, as we start to get more information about how this money can be applied and what we want to do with it, is picking those categories or those areas where we can have the biggest impact with these dollars. And so it may be that we ultimately can't fund all of these little nuances that we currently have listed in front of us so that everybody gets a piece of the pie. Maybe that we decide that infrastructure is the priority, and so we end up putting a large sum of money into one infrastructure project that allows us to get and produce something that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do for the long-term effects of the city, or maybe economic development as well, because I think that's another big impact of creating jobs and ultimately, revitalizing the community as a whole, whether it be small businesses or businesses in general, where again, maybe if we put a larger amount of money into that, it would have a bigger effect. So I think my kind of weighing in on it is more philosophically, which is, I think as we start to develop what we're going to fund and how much we're going to put in each category, is ultimately picking those categories or picking those projects that are going to have the biggest return on that investment. And that'd be kind of what I'm more interested in doing versus, maybe spreading it around thin, because I've seen that with some of our CRA projects that we do as well, where we'll take the money, we'll split it out, and we'll have all these little bitty projects funded, and they're great in their individual capacities, but it doesn't necessarily generate a huge return or a noticeable return in the city or the community itself, where if we'd have taken all that money and put it into one project and focused on one issue, we ultimately could have made a bigger impact or bigger difference that was visible and noticeable than, in a shorter period of time versus having it take 20 years to accomplish. So that's more of my comments on this right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And not to put you on the spot, but it's kind of related. I know that there's no provision in here to recapture overtime due to COVID, PPE, software, other, these dividers. That's a FEMA issue, and that's still moving forward. Are we comfortable there?
Yes, that is a FEMA issue, and we are moving forward. And I did not see anywhere where you could recoup overtime at all. I think that,
Not even in FEMA.
I don't think so, no. But with that being said, we expect to recoup overtime from FEMA.
Okay, yes, I just, as an aside, those kinds of direct expenses by the city are not covered in this plan, but we'd always been assured that there was some recourse from FEMA or through FEMA.
No, and we'll certainly confirm that. If there's any sort of percentage that we would have to pay, if there's something that FEMA doesn't pay and we could augment it, but we can follow up on that.
All right. Anything else? Councilman?
Thank you. They mentioned utilities and non-payment of utilities. Is there a way we can get numbers on what it looked like prior to COVID and then what happened during COVID as far as non-payment of utilities and what the actual losses may be for utilities? Because we are in a unique situation as a municipality owning our own system, and we've always had a problem with collections in utilities, but to know what the effect of COVID had on it, because we were basically put ourselves, or I guess a self-imposed moratorium on turnoffs as well. People move around quite a bit, so if they move, we get stuck holding the bag, because we can't hold owners accountable for tenant charges and past due amounts. So maybe if we can figure out what it is that COVID actually may have caused, because it's going to be different from 2019 through 2020, especially when COVID hit and we allowed people not to pay their bills, and which was the right thing to do at the time. But eventually we got to get back to a sense of normalcy as well, where people got to become responsible for taking care of themselves. So, but I'd like to know that information if possible. So I guess there's two requests that I've made: was the utility losses, and if we've lost any local businesses. And I don't know if we need to look at the person who maybe actually has a business license that operates a business out of their home, more so the brick and mortar type businesses that may have closed up somewhere along the line. So I haven't seen that many that haven't gone out of business. Most of our restaurants survived the COVID. Well, I don't know if Mitchell was it because of COVID? So there's one. So it'd be interesting to see, so we can plan for the future and maybe use some of these monies to create some incentives. One of the things we don't have is incentives for people coming into the city. We'll be working on our development services program here shortly, I think. Maybe that'll help some stuff too. But those are just thoughts that I have and some information I'd like to receive so that we could all see it. Thank you, Mayor.
Two
Thank
things,
you.
Councilman. Under the commercial assistance, you may not have heard it in transit, but we did mention that we think here we can provide business incentives. We're looking to be able to do that. And with regard to what kind of losses we will actually experience due to COVID and utilities, we're going to have a better sense of that within the next few months, and we're working on a plan now for how we're going to transition to no shutoffs, to letting people know that that period's going to end. We'll be coming to you individually to discuss that, but that's something we've been working very closely with customer service. And as people realize that they can't keep not paying their bill, then I think we'll have a much better sense of the need and what people can demonstrate to why they couldn't pay their bill. But we'll have more information in that regard in the next the next several weeks.
Good. And the commercial side and the business incentives, I'm looking at some of the impact fees and charges that are associated with opening a business in the city. The eye-opener was the lady who wanted to open the coffee donut shop on Chrome Avenue, and I think the county, if I remember, the county impact fees were somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000. That's a pretty large chunk of money to open a coffee donut shop. And I don't know who made the reference of you got to sell a lot of cups of coffee to pay that kind of money, but that's true. But if we have that kind of a program that helps with the impact fees and some of the other fees that are involved, then that would be very helpful. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, and as an aside, the county now claims that, no, we didn't give them that number. And where did, it's just a real comedy of Keystone Cops. It's not funny.
Kate, can you give us an update, if one is available, regarding the ARPA Emergency Rental Assistance Program? There was $48.2 million going possibly to Miami-Dade County for rental assistance, and we weren't sure if that was going to be shared or not shared. As the last email I saw was May 11th.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, and I don't know that the county needs to share that because it's separate from this. It's coming from the same tranche, if you will, of big money, but I don't know that that extends out to municipalities. But that's a great question, and we'll try to get an answer to that.
Thank you, because if there's other pots of money that we can dip into that kind of overlays with this, then that will free up more money that we can allocate elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add, and I think it kind of the philosophy that some of you have espoused that, going forward, we make it easier and more economical for businesses to continue and open so that we create new jobs, that we have a thriving downtown and a thriving community of businesses across the board, as well as addressing those land use application issues. And one thing that came to my mind that they're still kind of chewing on is, we're familiar with some properties that have commercial, inconsistent land use as to the zoning, as to what's actually there, who may potentially have to spend a lot of money just to be in compliance, to do an addition, like the dentist office a few weeks ago. And I've suggested that perhaps we look into taking on that on our own initiative, bringing those inconsistencies into being consistent rather than putting that time and cost burden on innocent property owners to, again, to encourage the establishment of businesses, the expansion of businesses, and the creation of jobs in the aftermath. So I think hopefully we can get very creative in the business development and enhancement arena.
Another comment on that with regards to our discussions on improving our development services process, there's going to be a pricey cost to the program and what's going to be required to make that process easier and smoother. So this would all tie into that. So do we have a workshop set up for that too?
I think we did.
The first development services workshop is tentatively scheduled now, probably in the daytime for the 10th of June. And at that workshop, in addition to whatever development service it had anticipated bringing to the first workshop, we want to also bring some of the items that the mayor mentioned yesterday that are related to development services. We'll obviously let you know exactly when it is, but that's the tentative date right now, the 10th of June.
Okay, so that meeting will happen before our next meeting on this. Perfect.
Yes. And what we want to bring, the 10th of June will be after the COW. What we want to do to bring to the June COW is just to confirm that the council, and this is really to Councilman Shelley's point, that the 4 areas are the 4 areas. Like if the council decided, you know what, these are the 4 areas that you see in front of you now. This is where all of the money falls under, however we use it. But if the council decided, you know what, let's just take all the money and put in investments in the infrastructure. I don't think the council is going to do that, but these areas, we just want to confirm that we are looking at different uses among these respective categories. So unless there was something like the council said, no, we don't want to have any premium pay for eligible workers, then that category would be out. So that's kind of what we want to just get direction on first. Because if, in fact, the council wants premium pay for eligible workers, the council can say at the meeting, at a council meeting, we want it for this group of workers and we want it to be X%. So that would be something that we could do sooner rather than later, presumably.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
I think that this is an excellent footstep to get started with, and I wouldn't say to eliminate any of these categories, but with what Councilman Shelley was alluding to, trying to focus on one versus too many. So if we could, maybe by next meeting, decide which one is going to be our primary focus, but still be able to put a little bit in everybody's category, that'd be great.
And I think, Councilwoman, that going forward, if we have the ability to do something under each of the categories, I don't believe that we're ever going to be held to a number, because 6 months from now or a year from now, we may realize that there's an impact that we never even contemplated. And if we keep these open, I think then we can just be guided accordingly and spend accordingly.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Anything further?
No.
Mr. Pearl? Well, let's call it adjourned. Thank you all.